At 02:17 a.m. on 30th June 1944, over the ragged dawn horizon of New Guinea's Atapi region, a trio of engines roared to life aboard Northrop P-61 Black Widow, number 4239445, codenamed Moonbeam Dream. Radar operator Sergeant Perry Red Calhoun peered into the glow of his AN/APS-6 radar displays, tracking a flicker at 8,000 feet, closing fast. Pilot Captain Jack Bulldog Haverford craned his neck, listening for any sign of Japanese twin-engine Betty bombers, and on the ground, Flight Chief George Gears Marino sipped cold coffee beside the Hawthorne production hangar, hands still oily from aligning heating ductwork. He knew this machine's first real intercept wasn't just another night sortie. The Black Widow's mission: intercept Japanese intruders under cover of darkness, a task no US aircraft had ever been designed for. A warning crackled over their radio. Bogey closing fast at 2 o'clock low, high closure. The big twin-boom fighter banked into the murky sky, wheels retracting, the smell of unburnt avgas and warmed hydraulics in the cockpit. Below, the Japanese flak batteries stirred in the pre-dawn haze. In the next 15 minutes, gears would grind, cannons would fire, and a tactical revolution would begin. At 05:30 a.m. on 12th of March 1944, in the maintenance bay at Hawthorne, California, the raw metal of a newly assembled P-61 glowed beneath overhead fluorescence. Lieutenant George Gears, Marino, lifted the access panel for the right Pratt & Whitney R2800-25S engine and looked at the wiring loom. His fingers traced the braid insulation, already showing microfractures from vibration testing. He exhaled, the hum of electric drills buzzing like bees outside the closure bay. He and his team had logged 32 engine install hours and 14 flight line taxi hours here at the plant. He knew the spec. Twin engine, twin boom design, full metal construction, 3-man crew. But something in the wiring didn't sit right. Just the slight burn smell of the gyro power lead near the gun turret arming switch. Marino had flagged it, filled out the maintenance log numbered H130429, and pulled the aircraft from the next test flight. The supervising engineer, Captain Fred Doc Lawrence, came by, looked at Marino's notes and said, "Good call, Marino. We're not target practice." The captain scribbled a note. "Inspect turret gyro harness. Suspect intermittent fault." They cleared the plane to continue, and Marino let himself breathe. Outside, the hangar doors creaked in a Pacific breeze. In a week, this machine would deploy to the Pacific Theater. The weight of that hung over him like a shadow cast by fluorescent tubes. In the lunchroom, Marino watched engineers flip pages of the latest USAAC specification for Night Interceptor Pursuit airplane dated October 1940, still classified. He thought, if this craft fails because of a wiring harness, pilots die under moonlight where no one will hear. The thought curdled in his gut. He returned to the bay floor, boots echoing on concrete, and reopened the access panel. The turret gyro Earth reference needed verification after hours. He noted it in his personal log with precise handwriting. The mission was no longer a drawing on paper. It had become his responsibility. Night fell fast over RAF Scorton, England on 16th of May, 1944. The crews of the 422nd Night Fighter Squadron lined up P-61s newly arrived from Hawthorne at dusk. Lieutenant Cole Winston Kratz strode down the line, boots crunching gravel, pockets of fog curling around twin booms. Radar operator Lieutenant John Echo Mercer felt the vibration of the P-61's sensors warming. He glanced at the belly-mounted Hispano M2 cannons, 420mm, and the dorsal Browning 50 cal turret. Heavy hardware for a fighter. Pilot Margie, Robert Razor, Kendrick swung into the cockpit, strapped in, the smell of heated varnish and engine oil mixing with gear leather grease. Their task: intercept German Heinkel, He 177s and Ju 88s raiding England's night skies, but they balked. Higher level brass believed the P-61 was too large, too slow for night fighter tasks. The British RAF grumbled openly about American confidence. In cockpit pre-flight, Mercer's radar screen picked a jitter, a non-ghost echo swirling at the edge of range. Kendrick gripped the yoke with gloved hands. Minutes later they were airborne, wheels up at 2145 HRs, the moon a sliver overhead. Below, searchlights carved shafts into black cloud layer. The P-61 banked, its twin radials humming at 2000 RPM. On the radar display, target vector changing. "Contact 9 o'clock low level," Mercer said, voice steady. Kendrick dove through a gap in cloud, the night air biting, canopy cold against his forehead. Over the moors they picked up contrails, illuminated faintly by moonlight. Then tracer fire stitched the darkness. Kendrick pulled hard, G-forces pressing him into his seat. Cannon blast echoed in the boom nacelles, the recoil shuddering through the airframe. The Heinkel shuddered, spun, flames licking along its fuselage. 1 kill confirmed. After landing, Kendrick and Mercer removed helmets and looked at each other in the dispersal hut. Weapon systems functioned as designed. Radar worked within tolerances. The airplane, for all its size, just did the job, but the moment stayed tight in their throats. They knew this was only the beginning. Colonel Kratz declared a wager with British officers that same night. P-61 will outturn the Mosquito at every altitude. The gamble was on. It was 03:45 on 10th August 1944 at Nadzab Airfield, Papua New Guinea. Lieutenant Marino, now assigned to Forward Maintenance Detachment with the 418th Night Fighter Squadron, wiped sweat from his brow with an oil-stained rag. The humidity hung like a wet blanket. Rivets glistened with condensation. The ground beneath the tent hangar puddled with rain that never seemed to dry. He opened the maintenance pit under P-61 serial 4239408. The hydraulic servo valve feeding the ventral flaps was overheating, fluid color turning pink, a warning sign. He hunkered down, fingers in hydraulic lines, listening for pump whine with the attentiveness of a surgeon. Under her twin booms, the ditching gear doors shuddered slightly in the wind. He radioed his log. Error code H472. Hydraulic temp exceeds spec at 225 degrees Fahrenheit. Recommend change filter and sample check. Gears ran the numbers in his head, still within margins, but field conditions were pushing parts beyond tolerance curves. The crew chief told Marino quietly, "If that fails on mission, she'll be dead stick in the jungle." Later that evening, the crew began gearing up for a dusk patrol. Pilot Captain James Blackjack Roberts strapped in, adjusting his harness with practiced efficiency. Marino watched from the wing root, hands gripping the access ladder. The P-61 rumbled down the rubber mat runway and lifted into twilight, twin exhausts glowing orange. Marino's heart pounded with the engines. If the hydraulics failed, the flaps might stick. Banking at night without flaps would be death, spiraling into trees. Back in the clamshell hangar, Marino checked the turret gyro harness he had flagged before, no longer a drawing on paper. It now held actual consequences measured in lives. He crossed off the item in his log. Verified. All systems normal. In the mess tent that night, Marino stared at his cocoa and thought of his comrades up in the sky, seeking enemy bombers in the dark while he bore the responsibility of making the machine work. The weight of maintenance had grown into a mission as real as any sortie. At 03:49 the radio crackled with static, then a voice. "Bogey spotted at 10,000 feet. Dark Widow, intercept in 20 seconds. The night war was escalating into something no one had fully anticipated. On 25th of June 1944, at Hollandia Airfield, Netherlands East Indies, the 6th Night Fighter Squadron received its first P-61s delivered by transport from Pearl Harbor. Crew were fresh from P-70s and Venturas and acclimatizing to the giant twin fighter with mixed enthusiasm. The sky above held Japanese Bettys and Irvings prowling supply routes. Lieutenant David Skip Henson was pilot, radar operator Lieutenant Frank Beacon. Llewellyn watched the green glow scopes with intensity, learned from months of frustration with older equipment. Their mission: perform intruder sorties from 21 YHRs until 02 YHRs, seeking raiders over the Philippines chain. The P-61 climbed through moonlit cloud deck at 1,500 feet per minute, the twin R-2800s groaning against humidity that fouled carburetors. Llewellyn whispered into the intercom, "Noise floor rising, echo at 020, some range shift." Skip closed throttle to match speed. The bow wave of the inter-island humidity slapped the canopy with audible force. A radar pinger flickered on Llewellyn's scope, twin-engine target crossing their patrol box. Skip banked left 30 degrees, guns cold safe until line of sight confirmed. The dorsal turret yawed as Gunner Sergeant Roy. Turret Collins tracked the bearing. Hulking silhouette emerged, black against black sky. They launched an intercept vector. Belching tracer cut the night in phosphorescent streams. The Betty buckled, smoke trailing as it dived into the sea with a distant splash. When they touched down at 02:14, Skip shut off the engines and listened to the ticking of cooling metal. The crew climbed out, knees shaking from adrenaline. Llewellyn handed the post-sortie log to the operations officer. Intercept number 1, confirmed kill at 21:47. Jubilant, sure, but tempered by exhaustion. In the debrief, they were told bluntly, "Only 12 more sorties this month. Japanese losses must be increased substantially." The squadron's strength was thin, stretched across too many islands. Meanwhile, back in California, Marino received a service bulletin dated 28 June. Replace rotor blade mounting on dorsal turret, part number X6739, due earliest opportunity. He frowned. Field parts were still delayed by transport bottlenecks. Marino's worry deepened, tempo rising, missions increasing, parts not matching pace. He whispered to another mechanic, "We're flying the machine faster than we can fix it." At 02:12, the air traffic controller called over loudspeaker, "Dark Widow inbound, stack altitude 8,000. Prepare scramble." The night of ghosts in the Pacific deepened into routine urgency. In January 1945, at Wright Field, Ohio, engineers ran late-night overload tests on the P-61's AI radar system. The AN-APS-6 and its electrical power distribution under simulated combat loads. Lieutenant George Gears Marino had been recalled from the Pacific for an upgrade conversion team, his field experience deemed essential. He stood in the echoing hangar as technicians stripped wiring looms with methodical precision. His eyes locked on the new synchronizer unit, the GE2CFR-12A3 gyroscopic fire control computer mounted in the dorsal turret. The breakthrough came quietly, without fanfare. During simulated night intercepts in blackout conditions, the radar gunner feed into the computer gave 8-second lock-on time versus 14 in earlier models. Marino logged it with satisfaction. Lock-on improved 42%, turret alignment stable plus or minus 0.5 degrees. The test pilot, Maggie William Skipjack Hayes, climbed the test P-61B to 20,000 feet and engaged dummy echo with new system. He reported over the radio, "Target trace smooth, turret slews faster, no servo hunting." Over the radio Marino heard, his voice crackling through static, "Good mark on, You've tightened it significantly. This meant the P-61 would now engage targets earlier, in thicker cloud cover, closing the gap in darkness that had cost lives in the Pacific. Marino felt the significance settle in his chest. The war in the dark hours could shift with this single upgrade. He drafted the installation manual that night by lamplight, fingers aching from cold Ohio winter. Back in the Pacific, the 508th Night Fighter Squadron awaited new gyros and wiring harnesses with impatience bordering on desperation. Marino's upgrade was the critical link between theory and survival. When the parts arrived in February by priority airlift, the squadron's maintenance logs read, "System upgrade kit P-61U-1 installed, test flight cleared." Mechanics in New Guinea whispered among themselves with rare optimism, "Night intruders beware, Webb's got new teeth." The numbers bore it out. Intercept success rates climbed from 34% to 61% in March alone. At 0351 on 14th August 1945, Lady in the Dark, P-61B2, number 4239408, claimed the last Allied night victory of the war, 1 hour after hostilities officially ended, but before word reached the forward airfields. The kill was logged, then quietly filed. The machine Marino had helped refine had closed the darkness one final time. In the Philippines, November 1944, the 421st Night Fighter Squadron operated from Iishima, flights over Okinawa looming as the next operational phase. The pressure was immense and unrelenting. Pilots flew 6 sorties per night. Maintenance crews slept in tents under the roar of early rocket attacks that shook the coral ground. Lieutenant Marino's team kept 2 P-61s hot at all times, engines pre-warmed, fuel-topped. The equipment, twin R-2800 engines, 4 20mm cannons, dorsal turret, radar nose. Each sortie burned 500 gallons of avgas. Every landing spewed heat into tropical nights that offered no cooling relief. One night in mid-November, P-61 number 4239728 landed with hydraulic failure. Gear extended, but flaps non-responsive. A crewman pulled Marino aside, voice tight. "If we'd had a 1-inch longer response time, we'd have crash-landed on coral." Marino dated that failure in his log with shaking hands. H489, servo line chafed by flap actuator linkage. Recommend bracket realign immediately. He worked through the night, oilcloth gloves black with grime, dew forming on his brow despite the heat. When the mechanic next to him collapsed from heat stroke at 0420, Marino administered first aid and wrote into log, "Crewman Evans evacuated. Schedule may slip 1 sortie." In the debrief the next day, the commander said quietly, without anger, "We cannot lose aircraft in darkness because we couldn't fix them in daylight." Marino heard the tone, not accusation but acknowledgement of shared burden. The war had extended to the shop floor, where fatigue, heat, and attrition threatened the mission as surely as enemy fire. Over the next 15 nights, the squadron languished at 68% readiness. The radical upgrades Marino helped install were now their lifeline against operational collapse. Records later showed that between November 1944 and February 1945, maintenance delays caused more mission cancellations than enemy action. The P-61's complexity, its radar, turret, hydraulics, demanded expertise under conditions that broke men and machines. Marino wrote in a letter home, later archived, "We fix what breaks. They fly what we fix. The circle holds, or we all fall." The understated poetry of exhaustion. Midnight, 17th of February 1945. The cockpit of a P-61 thundered with twin-engine growl as propellers bit into dense tropical air. Pilot Capt. Carl Raptor Jenkins and radar operator Luther Frank Echo Llewellyn clutched seats as they climbed toward typhoon-force winds off Okinawa's coast. barometric pressure dropping visibly on instruments. Winds battered the canopy with rain that sounded like gravel. The radar screen flickered with phantom returns, ground clutter amplified by storm interference. Turret hydraulics chirped as Gunner Sergeant Turret Collins attempted to steady aim against buffeting. The big twin shook with turbulence that tested every rivet. In the maintenance tent below, Marino and his team repaired the flap actuator hardware that failed the last sortie, working by lantern light as the storm rolled overhead. He tightened brackets at 4 a.m. as thunder rumbled close enough to feel in the ground. He thought of Jenkins and the crew up above, cutting through storm cloud with instruments fighting static and wind, their lives depending on hydraulics he had just calibrated. Up high, the P-61 tracked a twin-engine ferry bomber, making a low-level run toward the fleet anchorage, using cloud cover as concealment. Jenkins called into intercom, "Echo, lock it in now." Llewellyn flicked the radar knob with practiced motion. The radar echo brightened, solidified. Turrets slewed with servo whine. Tracers flashed in stuttering bursts. The bomber splashed into choppy water, flames extinguished almost instantly. For all the rage of weather, the machine held true to its design tolerances. After landing, they shook with cold and adrenaline. Jenkins said, pulling off his oxygen mask, "Did I ever thank you mechanics enough?" Llewellyn shouted back over wind, "No, but we got your 6 tonight." Marino later filed his log with careful notation. Battle damage. Hydraulic line nicked by flap actuator bracket. Cause, bracket miscleared during last upgrade job. Replacement completed. Recommend inspection interval reduce from 50 hours to 30 hours. He realized with clarity their human errors and machine failures were counted in lives saved or lost. The squadron flyers called the P-61 Black Widow for its black paint and silent kill capability, but on the ground, gearboxes and wiring looms were their midnight nightmares, the unglamorous calculus of survival. Spring 1945. The Pacific War approached its endgame with grinding inevitability. The 426th and 427th Night Fighter Squadrons moved to Luzon and Okinawa in preparation for invasion support. The big twin fighters soared out of Ishima toward the Japanese home islands, assigned new purpose: deny night raids and protect invasion fleets assembling in vast numbers. Marino's team had delivered upgrade kit P-61U-1 across the Pacific Theater. The log noted with satisfaction. Effect: increased target acquisition speed, decreased rat race maintenance by 18%. The maintenance tents burned with paperwork and oppressive heat. That night, Jenkins's crew detected a group of 3 Bettys inbound at 0206, flying in loose formation. The radar blip multiplied across Llewellyn's scope. They vectored to intercept at maximum climb rate. The P-61 banked over the dark sea, clouds skirting wingtip like tattered fabric. The dorsal turret spun into position, hydraulics pressurized and ready. 4 seconds later, bullets erupted in coordinated fire. 1 Betty exploded in a fireball that lit the ocean below. 2 others dived desperately. Jenkins coaxed the big twin back toward friendly fleet, fuel gauge reading marginal. Below, the mechanics at Ieshima lifted their torches in quiet hope, listening for engine sound. But then, in the hangar at EO 347, a loud crash shattered the night calm. A P-61 had ground looped on landing due to tire burst caused by coral debris. Marino vaulted over the barrier, heart pounding. Log entry: fuselage side damage, right main undercarriage failure, caused higher pressure error on pre-flight. He felt the weight of another lost resource in a war that demanded perfection from imperfect conditions. In the debrief, they reported 127 confirmed night kills by P-61s across all Pacific squadrons since June 1944, but more unsought losses in machines on the ground. 15 aircraft damaged beyond field repair. Marino sat that night under mosquito net, the hum of field generators and distant bomber engines in his ears. Sweat rolled down his face despite the cooling night. He whispered into darkness, "We fix what we can. They live what we hope." The war in the dark hours had shifted. It was no longer only aerial duels, but a mechanical marathon behind the scenes, fought with wrenches and wire. At 01:38 on the night of 14th August 1945 from Yontan Airfield, Okinawa, the 548th Night Fighter Squadron prepared a sortie aboard P-61 B2, number 42 to 394D08 Lady in the Dark. Pilot Lieutenant Lee Kendall, radar operator Lieutenant John Shearer, and gunner Sergeant Carl Doyle strapped themselves in with routine efficiency born of repetition. On the ground, Lieutenant Marino's maintenance crew godspeeded the engines, signed off fuel load 100 gallons, dropped tip tanks for extended loiter, checked turret hydraulics one final time. The log now read, "Inter-theater availability, 91%. A triumph of logistics." At 01:54, they took off into the humid Okinawa night, propellers slicing black sky like scythes. Sea spray glistened under landing lights as they climbed to 12,000 feet, heading northeast toward the Japanese home island staging zones. The air was thick, heavy with moisture. Radar chirped at 02:17, echo at 14,500 feet, closing fast. Shearer fed heading to Kendall with calm precision. Bearing 230, closure 320 knots. Target split twin-engined. Kendall banked. The canopy rumbled, instrument lights dimmed to preserve night vision. Turret spun into firing position. Turret gunner. Doyle whispered into intercom, "Locking. Guns hot." In a heartbeat, the 420mm cannon and the 50 cal turret unleashed coordinated fire. One plane burst into flame, trailing fire stream toward the water in a descending spiral. The second dived sharply. The third escaped into clouds that swallowed it completely. They returned to Yontan at 03:25, fuel reserves at minimum. In the debrief, Kendall and Shearer claimed one Tojo twin-engine fighter destroyed, one of the last aerial kills of the war. The paperwork later noted the kill occurred unofficially after cessation of hostilities, but it was logged nonetheless. A bureaucratic footnote to history. On the ground, Marino and his team pored over hour-meter readouts. Engines logged 119 hours since last major service. Marginal, but acceptable. Tire tread, showing wear patterns. Turret hydraulics operating at upper spec limits. He flagged for next day. Schedule immediate depot maintenance on No 42-39408. He felt the surge of relief. The war might be ending, but the mission was still alive until orders confirmed it. He whispered into the night air, "If it shifts, we hold the line." At 09 AM, weather reports showed peace negotiations progressing. But in the darkness, machines and men had held vigil one last time. Back in a Pittsburgh machine shop, Dr. Vladimir Pavlecka, chief of research for Northrop Corporation, cracked his knuckles over design schematics of the P-61 spread across his drafting table. He remembered the meeting at Wright Field in October 1940 when he was told by the procurement board, "Design that aircraft. No notes. Memorize it." Security protocols forbade written records during initial conception. He had pushed the concept forward: twin engine, twin boom, full metal construction, radar equipped. He recalled wiring diagrams drawn from memory, stereo gyro fire control logic, turret servo drawings refined through iteration. He drew 4 cannon layout. He argued for centerline placement of weapons to reduce convergence error and increase hit probability. In early 1945, his team tested the upgraded P-61C variant with Pratt & Whitney R2857 engines producing 2,800 horsepower each, shaved weight through refined metallurgy and improved service ceiling to 43,000 feet. But it arrived too late for combat deployment, only 41 units produced before war's end. Still, Pavlecka stayed in the control room as telemetry streamed from test flights. Radar gunner time to kill reduced. Intercepts increased across all metrics. When wartime logbooks reached him in September 1945, 127 confirmed victories, new night kill rate doubled in Pacific Theater compared to previous aircraft, he exhaled with quiet satisfaction. The victory was less that of pilots, more of the machine he helped conceive in 1940. The engineer's triumph, the design stopped the enemy's night raids, closed the dark hour that had favored attackers for centuries of warfare. Marino's wiring harnesses, Lester's turret servos, the cockpit radars, they all formed dots Pavlecka connected in retrospective analysis. He scribbled on a pad in December 1945, night interceptor viability, confirmed by combat data. Next phase, all-weather jet interceptor. The future already visible. On 11th of June 1948, the P-61 was redesignated F-61 under new Air Force nomenclature. The era of specialized night fighters began with Pavlecka's vision and ended with jet-powered successors. He kept one photograph on his desk, a P-61 silhouetted against Pacific dawn, twin booms stark against orange sky, no names visible, no glory captured, just the machine doing what it was designed to do. On 15th of September 1945, at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, the remaining P-61C-1, number 43830, was transferred to the National Advisory Committee for Aeronautics for storm penetration testing. Pavlecka watched as the aircraft dove into thunderstorms for atmospheric data collection, repurposed from weapon to scientific instrument. Lieutenant Marino, now stationed stateside awaiting discharge, inspected its wiring, hydraulics, and radar systems one final time. The war was over, but the machine lived on. For science, for knowledge. Maintenance logs noted: thunderstorm project install probe mast, radar antenna modifications for meteorological sweep. He felt something odd settle in his mind. The machine that saved lives was now an instrument of research. No longer darkness and bombs, but cloud penetration and atmospheric physics, data points replacing kill counts. Back in Okinawa, many mechanics were still sleeping in tents, waiting for transport home that came slowly. Marino wrote in his journal with careful script, "Victory is quieter than bombs. Ending feels like silence, not celebration." Pavlecka's engineering success came at a cost visible in retrospect. Machines obsolete within years, thousands dead despite technological advantage, and a new jet era looming that would render propeller-driven night fighters anachronisms. He asked himself in private moments, had they built an exemplar or an anachronism? The question hung heavier than his tools ever had. The P-61 represented a pinnacle of propeller-driven night fighter design, yet its operational life lasted barely 3 years before jets made it obsolete. As the last P-61 units were inactivated in 1950, replaced by F-82 twin Mustangs and jet-powered F-89 Scorpions, the night fighter baton passed to new technology. But the design's DNA persisted in radar integration, fire control computers, and multi-crew coordination doctrines that defined air defense for decades. In the quiet morning of 30th of November 1945, Lieutenant George Gears Marino walked through the empty hangar at Hawthorne for the last time before discharge. The line of P-61s was gone. Only frames and packing crates remained, destined for storage or scrap. He touched the nose gear retraction actuator on a remaining airframe, a design he'd serviced hundreds of times, fingers finding familiar contours automatically. He thought of Jenkins, Llewellyn, Kendall, the mechanics under hot Pacific rains, the radar operators and pilots chasing ghosts at night through weather that could kill as surely as enemy fire. He thought of Pavlecka drafting schematics in 1940, anticipating a wartime need that most couldn't envision. Marino looked at his journal, thumbed entries marked with grease and sweat. 041044, hydraulic incident. Loan 1745, radar upgrade successful. 140845, last sortie Okinawa. The record of his war, written in maintenance codes and part numbers. He closed the book with finality. He wrote a final note in careful handwriting. The machine we built helped them fight the night. We did our part, unseen but essential. Then he walked out into a California autumn breeze, the echo of propellers gone but present in memory. The Black Widow's legacy lived not only in kills, tabulated and victories claimed, but in engineering triumphs, silent mechanics, and the quiet skill of men who fixed them in darkness so others could fly. Decades later, the P-61 remains a symbol of a technological leap that changed aerial warfare. Historians note, the Black Widow was the first operational US warplane designed specifically as a night fighter, a purpose-built machine for darkness. Dr. Vladimir Pavlecka's 1940 concept became a real aircraft that flew 127 confirmed kills. Lieutenant George Marino's midnight fixes saved lives that would never know his name. Pilots like Lieutenant Lee Kendall and radar operators like Lt. John Shearer closed the darkness over the Pacific seas with tools that didn't exist when the war began. Mechanics and engineers became unseen warriors in a conflict that demanded their expertise as much as courage. In an archival memo, dated 17th July 1946, filed at Wright-Patterson, Night Interceptor Forces proved viability. Maintain legacy for all-weather operations. Radar integration and fire control automation represent significant advances. The document mentions the Black Widow's digital systems, radar turret integration, and twin boom architecture as templates for future development. Today, one P-61 is on display at the National Air and Space Museum in Virginia, painted as Moonbeam Dream. Children look in awe at its twin booms, its belly-mounted cannon, its silent promise of darkness broken by technology. The name of the machine rarely leaps into popular war stories, yet its impact did. It closed the night, denied enemy raiders, and pushed aircraft engineering forward into the jet age. Marino's journal now lies in a private archive, a testament to the unseen crew. Pavlecka's blueprints rest in the Northrop collection at the Smithsonian. Their names may be footnotes, but their work changed the war in ways that endured beyond victory. And so, the story ends not with the thunder of bombs, but the whisper of a machine rising into darkness, and men who made it rise. When the night came, wrote engineer Pavlecka many years later in a 1967 interview, we built our answer, the answer held.